It's Marc Summers calling in. I was supposed to do an interview, I believe, today.
Yes, Mr. Summers, how you doing today?
I'm well, yourself?
I'm excellent. It's great to be speaking with you.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way, sir.
Excellent. Well, Marc, I got to say, looking back at your history, you've done just about everything there is to do in the entertainment business. Can you talk to us a bit about your early days and how you got started in show business?
Well, I'm one of those people that came out of the womb and knew exactly what I wanted to do. As a kid, I would watch variety television, and then when I discovered Johnny Carson, that was like, oh my God, that's the guy I want to be. And so I started doing magic when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and was doing birthday parties and every kind of event that I could in Indianapolis, where I grew up. And then I ended up starting in radio in 1966, 67 in Elwood, Indiana, WBMP. I was about 15 years old. I did it for about a year, and then it was about an hour from my home in Indy, and the guy who was driving me up got fired. And so when I left, a young broadcaster by the name of Dave Letterman took my place. I don't know whatever happened to him, but he did that. And so I was doing magic on kids' TV shows and things such as that, and knew I wanted to grow, and ended up going to school in Boston and started working stand-up comedy in various places around the Boston area. And then I moved to L.A. in 73, I think it was, 1973. And I started as a regular at the Comedy Store in 1976, but prior to that I was a regular at a place called the Magic Castle here in Los Angeles. So it was always about doing stand-up and being a comedian, and then eventually getting into the hosting thing. I also was a huge admirer from the time I was in nursery school, watching Bob Barker do Truth or Consequences on NBC. And so the path was either become Johnny Carson or become Bob Barker, and that was the direction I chose.
Well, yeah, obviously it worked out for you, and eventually you wound up at Nickelodeon, kind of the Bob Barker of Nickelodeon in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of true. So we started in October of '86, and the ratings blew up. If you get in cable now a 0.3 or a 0.4, maybe a 0.5, that's an extraordinary number. We were getting fives, full, not 0.5s, full fives. And at the time, UHF TV was huge. They had reruns of Different Strokes and Facts of Life, and all of a sudden their ratings started to diminish, and they couldn't figure out why. Well, kids were watching Double Dare, and one thing led to another. And I was there for 8 years, from '86 to about '94, and then I left to do other things.
So was your background with magic and working with kids in the past, was it easy to kind of transition into Double Dare and working with kids?
Well, nothing's easy. I just think the most experience you can get being in front of an audience is about the most important thing that you can do. And then I don't think it makes a whole bunch of difference whether you're doing for kids or adults, although kids are a little more difficult, but not much. In many ways, adults can be equally or more difficult. And I think the more time, like for instance, I auditioned for Double Dare when I was 33 years old. If I would have had that opportunity when I was 23, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I didn't have enough experience yet. And I think that's what it's all about. The thing that I'm blown away today about is when I see some people on YouTube who have virtually little or no experience, and how savvy they are with the camera and how comfortable they feel. It's a whole different thing with this generation.
Well, yeah, I'm definitely of the Double Dare generation growing up, and I got to say my favorite shows, I think, were when you guys had the wrestlers on. Do you have any memories of that?
Oh, sure. Super Sloppy Mania 1 and Super Sloppy Mania 2. My favorite one was when we had, that's funny that you remember that, when we had Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan on was our first one. And the second one we had Hacksaw Jim Duggan on, I remember. And yeah, they were fun. I mean, wrestling couldn't have been hotter at the time, and those guys played so well. I mean, Gorilla Monsoon was a very highly educated man, had 3 college degrees, and yet he was able to play that character that he played. And Bobby grew up in Indianapolis. Bobby Heenan didn't graduate high school and was perhaps one of the best entertainers. Sadly, he has had, I believe it's throat cancer over the last several years, and is a shell of the man that I knew, but was in his heyday probably the funniest and brightest entertainer around. He was amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I know you mentioned kind of starting early on with Nickelodeon, really, I guess in its infancy when you started there. Could you kind of sense it was turning into a huge company? I mean, it's kind of a global entity nowadays.
Oh, no, it's huge. No, I didn't. In fact, I knew very little about Nickelodeon at the time because I was a grown-up, didn't have any reason to watch it, and the way we discovered it was when we had our first child, Matthew, and we would get up for the 3 o'clock feeding and get the East Coast feed of a horrible puppet show called Pinwheel, and that's where I first got introduced to Nickelodeon, and then they were doing a show called Livewire, which was a kid's version of the Phil Donahue show, and I sort of got intrigued by that. So I learned a little bit about it, but when I got the job, I was just happy to, get a full-time gig hosting a show, and so I didn't know too much about what had happened prior to me getting there and had no idea what we were about to, explode on the scene with.
Well, Mark, I know you did a couple other Double Dare offshoots, I guess you'd call them, and of course, What Would You Do? A lot of game shows on Nick around that time. I'm assuming it was because of you and the popularity with Double Dare that they were able to do that.
Yeah, Mike O'Malley followed and did Guts and a few other shows, and Phil Moore did some, and Dave Azer did some. And yeah, that's, I like to think of Nick in its heyday at that time, and would love to see in some form or fashion that kind of television being brought back for kids, because there are no games, or none of that kind of entertainment for a particular generation, the 6 to 11-year-olds that we were, primarily trying to hit back in the day. So, yeah, it was a fascinating time, and it was fun to be on the ground floor.
Well, and of course, people my age nowadays, still nostalgic for that time period with Nickelodeon and, having reunions and writing books. And, it's still those days having such a huge impact on people still today.
I know, and your generation in particular, yeah, I know we're in the middle of finishing up a documentary on me called The Life and Slimes of Marc Summers. I know there's another one out there called The Orange Years that's trying to get some traction. We did a 30th anniversary show on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and that exploded, and we're in all sorts of conversations to do some more stuff with that. So, yeah, there's a huge audience out there that kind of wants to relive their childhood, and I'm certainly glad they do.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. The documentary you mentioned, I read there's another one on the way called On Your Mark. A lot of stuff happening.
Yeah, the guys and women who grew up watching our kind of television are in the workplace now, and a lot of them, I'm always flattered to say to me, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because fun I saw you having on television. And, it's just kind of cool that they're all kind of following their dreams. In fact, the kid who's producing and editing my show now, the On Your Mark thing, is a guy who I met when he was about 14 years old, and first made contact down at Nick Studios in Orlando, and now he's early 30s, has his own production company outside of Houston, very successful guy, which is fantastic. Matt Klickstein, who wrote the book Slimed, is a producer, and he's writing books and doing cool stuff. So the kids I kind of helped raise are all doing quite well, and it's nice to see.
Yeah, that is excellent. I got to ask you too, Mark, it doesn't seem like a natural progression, but you wound up working quite a bit for the Food Network as well. Did you always have a passion there with food?
No, that's another one of those things, right place, right time. I've been there for 17 years, and I was actually there to pitch another person, and the next thing I know, they offered me a job. And the first show I did was called It's a Surprise. It was about surprise parties. The surprise was nobody was watching. But then they offered me the Unwrapped, which is the longest-running series in the history of Food Network, and that worked out quite well. And then over the last 11 years, I produced a lot of television for them, primarily Dinner and Restaurant Impossible, and a few other specials along the way. So, yeah, glad not to be a one-hit wonder, and, have had two really long careers, first at Nick and then at Food, and many stops in between. I was at Lifetime for a while. I was at History Channel for a while, hosted some stuff on the networks, major networks as well, and been a regular over on The View since '99. So it's been quite a fun and interesting career.
Yeah, and it's great to hear everything is good for you. I know you had a few health scares recently, but it sounds like everything's back on track and you're in great shape.
Yeah, I had a cancer scare about 6 years ago, and I was in chemo for 2 years and got past that, and then I got in a car accident and broke every bone in my face, and then got past that. So, people have challenges in their lives, and I've had a couple of difficult ones, but overcome them and keep moving forward. I don't dwell on the past. I only think about the future and the positive side of that, and so far so good.
Excellent. We mentioned the documentaries. Is there anything else maybe in the works or anything else upcoming?
Regular judge on guys' grocery games and a few other things that I'm in development with that can't talk too much about. But keep your eyes and ears open for some new Nickelodeon news maybe sometime this summer. And, I think it'll make a lot of your generation particularly happy.
Awesome. Again, Marc, I'm a huge fan. I grew up watching everything you did, and it's been great having you on today. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for asking me, and you have a great evening.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.